My own sister betrayed me with my husband. 1 week later, we sat down to finalize the divorce. I acted like I had no clue about their affair. Then the lawyer announced that half of my fortune goes to him. I could not help smiling because they had no idea what I had already set in motion. My name is Zaria. I am 34 years old and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Z-Tech Logistics. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who underestimated your worth. To understand how I ended up sitting across a negotiation table from the two people who destroyed my marriage, you have to go back exactly 1 week. I had returned early from a grueling business trip in Chicago. My company was expanding its supply chain operations, and I was pulling 80-hour weeks. I thought coming back a day early to our Buckhead mansion would be a pleasant surprise for my husband, DeAndre. We had been married for 5 years. He was a Morehouse graduate, a proud member of a prestigious fraternity, and a finance executive. We were supposed to be the ultimate Atlanta power couple. Instead, I was the one walking into an absolute nightmare. I unlocked the heavy oak front door of our home. The house was quiet, but the lights in the main living room were dimmed low. I dropped my luggage by the foyer and walked down the hallway. Soft rhythm and blues music played from the surround sound system. When I stepped into the living room, the sight before me made the breath leave my lungs entirely. DeAndre was sitting on my custom velvet sofa, pouring a glass of my most expensive reserve bourbon. Sitting right beside him with her legs draped intimately over his lap was my younger sister, Chloe. She was wearing my pure silk robe, the exact same robe I bought during my honeymoon in Paris. Chloe was 32 years old. She was the golden child of our family who ran a flashy public relations firm funded entirely by our parents. She had always been the center of their universe, while I was expected to shoulder the heavy burdens and pay the bills. When they noticed me standing in the doorway, DeAndre froze. His hands suspended mid-air holding the crystal glass. But Chloe did not flinch. She did not jump up or look ashamed. Instead, she took a slow sip from her glass and gave me a wicked smirk. "Do not look so shocked, Zaria," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You work 80 hours a week. A high-value man like DeAndre needs a real woman at home, not a corporate workhorse. Mom always said your blind ambition would leave you lonely, and look at you now. Standing there in your stiff business suit, while your husband is finally getting the affection he deserves." The sheer audacity of her words felt like a physical strike to my chest. This was not just a betrayal of my marriage. It was a calculated attack on my entire existence. I had paid for her college tuition when our parents fell short. I had given her the down payment for her first luxury car. And here she was wearing my clothes and claiming my husband without an ounce of remorse. "Get out of my house," I said. My voice was dangerously calm. I did not scream or throw things. The shock had completely bypassed hysteria and settled into a cold, hard, and calculating rage. I looked at DeAndre, who was quickly setting his glass down and scrambling to stand up. "Both of you get out right now," I demanded. DeAndre puffed out his chest, trying to regain his dominant posture. He adjusted his collar and took a bold step toward me. "You are not kicking anyone out, Zaria," he declared loudly. "I pay half the mortgage on this house. You get out. If you had been a better wife, I would not have to look elsewhere for comfort." Before I could respond to his ridiculous claim, the front door chimed and opened. My parents, Pastor Thomas and Vivian, walked into the house. They had a spare key and often dropped by unannounced, usually expecting me to host them or provide money for my father and his massive church. I turned to them expecting shock or outrage. I expected my father, a man of faith, to reprimand his son-in-law for committing adultery. I expected my mother to scold my sister for sleeping with my husband. Instead, my mother gasped and looked at me with absolute disdain. "What is all this yelling?" Vivian demanded, clutching her designer handbag tightly. "Zaria, why are you causing a scene in this beautiful home?" "Mom," I said, gesturing to the sofa, "DeAndre is sleeping with Chloe, right here in my living room." My mother did not look surprised at all. In fact, she let out a long, exasperated sigh, as if I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. If you acted more like a wife and less like a boss, your husband would not have to look to your sister for comfort, Vivian said, her tone sharp and unforgiving. You have always been too aggressive, Zarya. Chloe knows how to nurture a man. She understands what a successful black man needs to feel respected. Pack a bag, Zarya. Do not embarrass your father and his congregation with a dramatic public scene. Just go to a hotel and let them be. I stared at my mother in complete disbelief. The woman who had given birth to me was actively kicking me out of my own home so her favorite daughter could comfortably continue an affair with my husband. I looked over at my father. Pastor Thomas simply shook his head and looked away, refusing to make eye contact with me. He cared more about the optics of a messy divorce ruining his church reputation than he cared about his own daughter and her broken heart. The psychological manipulation was profound and deeply rooted in our family history. They were completely unified in their twisted narrative. I was the problem because I worked hard and built wealth. Chloe was the victim who just wanted love and romance. DeAndre was the poor, neglected husband who deserved better. They expected me to break down into tears. They wanted me to cry, to beg for my marriage to survive, to apologize for being too ambitious. That had been my designated role my entire life. I was the family scapegoat who always eventually caved in order to keep the peace and protect their prestigious image. But the Zarya they knew died in that exact moment. I did not cry a single tear. I did not argue with their delusion. I turned on my heel and walked up the sweeping staircase to the master bedroom. I grabbed a single leather duffel bag and packed a few days' worth of clothes. I took my jewelry, my important business hard drives, and my passport. I moved with mechanical precision. My mind was no longer focused on the blinding pain of betrayal. It was entirely focused on absolute destruction. I walked back down the stairs with my bag over my shoulder. DeAndre, Chloe, and my parents were waiting in the grand foyer. They looked incredibly victorious. Chloe was leaning heavily against DeAndre, a smug and satisfied smile playing on her lips. My mother nodded approvingly as she saw my packed bag. Good, Vivian said. Take some time to cool off and think about your priorities. Maybe you can salvage this marriage if you finally learn to compromise and be soft. I walked right past my mother without giving her a glance. I stopped directly in front of DeAndre and reached into my purse. I pulled out a thick sealed envelope from my private bank. I dropped it squarely onto his chest. He caught it, looking confused and slightly panicked. You pay half the mortgage, I asked, my voice echoing off the marble floors. Read the refinancing papers from last month, DeAndre. My name is the only one on the deed. I paid off the entire remaining balance with my corporate bonus. You have absolutely no legal right to this property. I will have the local police escort you out for trespassing by midnight. Enjoy the bourbon while it lasts. I walked out the heavy front doors without looking back at their stunned faces. The warm Atlanta night air hit my face like a welcome embrace. I unlocked my luxury car, climbed into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking heavily, but not from sorrow or grief. They were shaking from pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I pulled out my phone and dialed a specific number I kept on speed dial for major corporate emergencies. Elias Sterling was the most ruthless and high-powered attorney in Georgia. He handled massive acquisitions, corporate mergers, and high-net-worth divorces with the cold and calculated efficiency of an assassin. He picked up on the second ring. Elias, I said, gripping the leather steering wheel tightly. Zarya. He answered, his deep voice instantly alert. What is wrong? DeAndre is sleeping with Chloe, I stated clearly and concisely. My parents are backing them up. They just tried to kick me out of my own house. There was a brief, heavy silence on the line. I could almost hear Elias calculating the legal variables and preparing a strategy. What do you want to do? He asked calmly. I started the engine, the roar of the motor matching the intense pounding of my heart. Initiate protocol. Burn it down. I told him firmly, I do not just want a simple divorce. I want to leave them with absolutely nothing. I want every single asset locked down, every shared account audited. I want to bleed him dry until he begs. Consider it done, Elias replied without a second of hesitation. Meet me at the office at 8 tomorrow morning. We are going to war. I drove away from this Buckhead mansion, leaving behind the only life I had ever known. The betrayal stung deeply, but the exciting prospect of what was coming next kept my head held high. My family thought I was just a mindless workhorse. They thought my money and my companies were endless resources they could freely take and manage as they pleased. They believed they held all the power because they held the social capital in our community. They had absolutely no idea that I had spent the last 10 years building a massive financial empire that operated entirely outside their view. DeAndre thought he was going to walk away with 50% of my wealth. Chloe thought she was going to step into my life and play the rich wife. My parents thought they could sweep my dignity under the rug to protect their church. They were all dead wrong. The war had just begun, and I was holding the nuclear launch keys. I drove into the city lights fully prepared to execute the most flawless revenge they would never see coming. I slept at the Four Seasons downtown. The adrenaline from the night before had barely faded when the barista at the lobby cafe handed back my corporate platinum card. Declined, he said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. I stared at the small black square of plastic in my hand. This specific card was linked to my personal joint checking account with DeAndre, a safety net account we maintained for household emergencies. I pulled out my phone to transfer funds from another account when the notification popped up on my screen. It was a text message from DeAndre. I was very angry. I opened the message. My lawyer says it is marital assets, using it to fund Chloe public relations firm expansion. Good luck paying for your gas, boss lady. I logged into my personal banking app. The account balance stared back at me in bold red numbers. 0. He had drained exactly $150,000 at 6 in the morning. He did not just take the money, he took it to fund the sister who was currently sleeping in my bed. He wanted me to panic. That was the reaction my family had trained him to expect. Instead, I paid the barista with a different card, drank my espresso, and drove straight to the glass tower where Elias Sterling ran his law practice. Elias was already waiting in his corner office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. He had my financial portfolio spread across his massive mahogany desk. When I walked in, I tossed my phone onto the documents, letting him read DeAndre's text message. Elias scanned the screen, and his expression remained entirely neutral. I can file an emergency injunction by noon, he said, tapping a silver pen against the heavy wooden polished desk. We can freeze the receiving account and have him cited for dissipation of marital assets before he buys your sister a single billboard. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him and laughed a cold, hollow sound that surprised even me. Let him have the peanuts, Elias. Elias raised an eyebrow. $150,000 is an expensive bag of peanuts, Zaria. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on his desk. You do not understand how my family operates. When I was 19, my parents drained the college fund I had been contributing to since I was 14. They took every dime I earned from my high school jobs and used it to buy Chloe a brand new BMW when she pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha. I am entirely used to them stealing from me. DeAndre thinks taking that money is a fatal blow because that really is how a small-minded man thinks. He is playing checkers. But DeAndre forgot one crucial thing about how I structure my businesses. Elias set his pen down, completely focused now. What did he forget? DeAndre loves the finance brother aesthetic, I explained. He loves walking into expensive restaurants and dropping a heavy metal card to impress his fraternity brothers. When we got married, he demanded access to a commercial credit line to handle his supposed real estate investments. I gave him an authorized user card linked to Z-Tech Logistics. I never check it because the balance is paid automatically through the corporate accounting department. Elias pulled up the Z-Tech Logistics corporate files on his monitor. What is the limit on that line of credit? $2 million, I said smoothly. And because he is merely an authorized user and not a primary guarantor, he has zero legal Rights to keep it open if the primary account holder decides to liquidate and close the account. I want you to draft the divorce filings. I have a quick stop to make at the bank. The drive to the financial district felt incredibly liberating. I was no longer the dutiful wife trying to hold a broken marriage together. I was no longer the obedient daughter trying to buy her parents' affection. I was a woman executing a surgical strike. The bank manager, Mr. Harrison, greeted me with the utmost respect. As the chief executive officer of Z Tech Logistics, I was one of their most valuable commercial clients. He ushered me into his private office, offering me sparkling water and a comfortable seat. "How can we assist you today, Zarya?" he asked, pulling up my profile on his computer. "I need to make an immediate structural change to my commercial credit accounts," I stated, keeping my posture perfectly rigid. "I have a $2 million revolving line of credit under the logistics division. DeAndre is listed as an authorized user. I need his access revoked instantly. Furthermore, I want the entire credit line frozen, liquidated, and permanently closed." Mr. Harrison stopped typing. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he looked at me with mild concern. "Zarya, closing a line of that magnitude might impact your daily operational liquidity. Are you absolutely certain you want to liquidate the entire account? We can simply remove his name and issue you new cards." "I do not want new cards, Mr. Harrison. I want the entire account eradicated. I want any pending charges under his name reversed or flagged as unauthorized if they were initiated after 8 this morning. Transfer any remaining balance to my secure offshore holding account and shut the line down." He nodded, recognizing the tone of a woman who was not asking for advice. "Of course. Processing the closure now. All authorized user cards will be deactivated immediately. The remaining 1.8 million in available credit is being locked." I sat in the plush chair and watched him work. It took exactly 14 minutes to dismantle the financial foundation of DeAndre fake millionaire lifestyle. For 5 years, he had paraded around Atlanta buying expensive watches, treating his friends to extravagant dinners, and funding his high-risk crypto investments using my company credit line. I walked out of the bank with a formal confirmation receipt in my handbag. The sun was shining brightly over the city streets. I felt a surge of raw power. My parents had always demanded that I shrink myself so Chloe could shine. They demanded I stay silent so DeAndre could feel like the man of the house. They built their entire reality on my silent compliance. My phone began to vibrate before I even reached my car. I looked at the caller identification. It was DeAndre. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. He was relentless. I unlocked my car, sat in the driver's seat, and finally accepted the incoming call. "Zarya," he screamed into the receiver. His voice was a mixture of absolute panic and explosive rage. "What did you just do?" I adjusted my rearview mirror, perfectly calm. "I am not sure what you mean, DeAndre. I am just running a few morning errands. Do not play stupid with me," he yelled, the sound of background noise echoing behind him. "I am sitting at the Porsche dealership in Buckhead. I just tried to put the down payment on the new Panamera for Chloe, and my black card was declined. The finance manager just came out here and cut my card in half right in front of Jamal and my fraternity brothers. He told me the account was liquidated. Turn it back on right now." I could picture the scene perfectly. DeAndre sitting in a sleek glass office surrounded by his peers, trying to play the big shot benefactor for my sister. "Why would I turn it back on?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, chilling octave. "You told me yourself just a few hours ago. Marital assets go both ways, sweetheart. That was joint savings." He sputtered, his breathing heavy and erratic. "This is my investment line. You are trying to embarrass me in public. You are acting crazy, Zarya. Call the bank and fix this before I call your father." I leaned back against the smooth leather headrest. "Call my father. You seem to have forgotten how property rights work. You were an authorized user, DeAndre, an employee on a corporate account. You have been playing a rich man using my money for 5 years, but the ride is over. Enjoy the money you stole this morning because you just lost your $2 million safety net." Zarya, you listen to me. He started to threaten, but I pressed the end call button, cutting off his frantic voice. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. The stolen money was a strategic sacrifice. By letting him take the cash, I gave him a false sense of victory. I made him feel smart and untouchable, and DeAndre was the most careless man I knew. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Elias. Mediation demands arrived from his attorney. I smiled, putting the car in drive. The trap was setting itself perfectly. The trap was setting itself perfectly. Sunday arrived with the thick, humid heat that Atlanta was famous for. It was the perfect afternoon for the annual elite HBCU alumni cookout. This was not a regular backyard barbecue with paper plates and cheap beer. This was an exclusive, highly curated gathering of Morehouse men and Spelman women hosted at a sprawling private estate in Sandy Springs. It was the specific place where the black bourgeoisie of the city gathered to network, show off their latest acquisitions, and ruthlessly maintain their social hierarchies. I wore a tailored emerald green sundress that perfectly complemented my skin, and I drove myself in my matte black Range Rover. I handed my keys to the valet and walked onto the sprawling, manicured lawn. The air smelled of expensive cologne, grilled seafood, and fresh floral arrangements. Laughter and upbeat rhythm and blues music drifted over the crowd. I grabbed a glass of iced sweet tea from a passing server and surveyed the scene. It did not take long to spot them. DeAndre and Chloe were holding court near the edge of the infinity pool. DeAndre was wearing a crisp linen shirt, unbuttoned just enough to show his gold fraternity chain, while Chloe clung to his bicep like it was her personal life raft. She was wearing a white designer dress and laughing too loudly at a joke someone had just made. They looked like the perfect power couple. But then the bright afternoon sunlight caught something sparkling brilliantly on Chloe's wrist, and my blood ran ice cold. She was wearing my late grandmother's diamond tennis bracelet. That priceless heirloom had been explicitly promised to me before my grandmother passed away. It was a vintage piece, custom-made and completely flawless. My parents had refused to give it to me on my wedding day, claiming it needed to be professionally cleaned and appraised for insurance purposes. Now I knew the absolute truth. They had deliberately given my rightful inheritance to the golden child to wear while parading around with my stolen husband. The sheer disrespect was staggering. I took a slow sip of my sweet tea, letting the cold liquid cool the massive fire building in my chest. I did not storm over there and snatch it off her wrist. That would be playing perfectly into their established narrative of the angry, unhinged woman. Instead, I stood tall and began walking directly toward the center of the patio, where the largest crowd of our peers was gathered. Before I could even reach the edge of the polished pool deck, a heavy hand clamped down hard on my shoulder. I turned to find my father, Pastor Thomas, glaring at me. His warm, pastoral smile, the one he used to charm thousands of devoted parishioners every single Sunday, was completely gone. His face was flushed red with suppressed anger, and his grip on my arm was uncomfortably tight. He pulled me forcefully behind a large decorative hedge out of direct view of the main crowd of attendees. "What do you think you are doing here, Zarya?" He hissed, his voice a harsh, punishing whisper. "I am a Spelman alumna, Dad," I replied calmly, shaking off his heavy hand. "I received an invitation to this event just like everyone else." "You are embarrassing the family," he snapped, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket. "Do you have any idea how important this afternoon is? Chloe just secured a massive public relations contract with a major sports franchise. She is networking with key investors right now. Do not ruin her networking opportunity just because you are bitter and jealous." I stared at the man who was supposed to be my protector and spiritual guide. "You are worried about Chloe networking?" I asked, my voice dangerously steady. "She is parading around with my husband, the man I am still legally married to. She is wearing my grandmother's diamond bracelet. And you want me to worry about her career? If you had invested half as much energy into your marriage as you do into your logistics company, you would not be in this situation." My father shot back, lacking even a tiny shred of empathy. You could not keep your man, Zaria. That is your failure, not hers. A strong black man needs respect and peace at home. You only offered him competition. Now go back to your car and leave before you cause a public scene and damage this family's pristine reputation. He spoke to me as if I was a defiant, disobedient child ruining a beautiful family portrait. He had always protected Chloe, shielding her from any negative consequences while expecting me to absorb all the collateral damage. But I was entirely done absorbing their hits. I looked my father dead in the eye, refusing to back down. My reputation is doing just fine, I told him firmly. As for the family reputation, you might want to brace yourself. I stepped quickly around him, leaving him standing silently behind the hedge. I walked straight toward the DJ booth, which was set up on a raised platform overlooking the entire patio area. The DJ, a guy I recognized from our college days, smiled and nodded at me as I approached. I reached over the complex turntable and smoothly lifted the microphone from its heavy metal stand. I tapped the top of it twice. The sharp thud echoed over the massive outdoor speakers, instantly cutting through the music and the loud party chatter. Hundreds of heads turned rapidly in my direction. The clinking of expensive cocktail glasses stopped. The laughter died down entirely. The entire elite crowd of lawyers, doctors, and corporate executives went completely silent. I scanned the sea of faces until my eyes locked directly onto DeAndre and Chloe. They were frozen by the sparkling pool. Chloe's smug, satisfied smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer absolute panic. DeAndre dropped his hand from her waist, his posture suddenly rigid and defensive. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, projecting my voice clearly and confidently across the sprawling luxury estate. "I hope you are all enjoying the beautiful cookout. I just wanted to take a brief moment to make a very special family announcement." I saw my father rushing out from behind the decorative hedge, waving his hands frantically, but he was far too late. I had the floor, and I had their absolute undivided attention. "I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations to my younger sister, Chloe." I continued smiling warmly at the confused crowd. "I hear she just secured a massive new public relations contract today. That is a truly wonderful achievement for her firm. I also want to congratulate her on her brand new romantic relationship with my husband, DeAndre." A loud collective gasp rippled rapidly through the crowd. Eyes darted wildly between me standing on the stage and the guilty couple standing frozen by the pool. Harsh whispers erupted instantly among the guests. In this tight circle of high society, your public reputation was absolutely everything, and I was publicly burning theirs to the ground. "Yes, it is entirely true," I said, my voice dripping with lethal, undeniable sweetness. "They are very much in love. In fact, they are so deeply committed to building a life together that Chloe is currently wearing my late grandmother's diamond tennis bracelet to celebrate the occasion. It is a stunning vintage piece, Chloe. It really catches the light beautifully." Chloe instinctively reached over to quickly cover her wrist with her other hand, her face turning a deep burning shade of crimson. People standing near them physically took a step back, creating a clear, visible circle of total isolation around the two of them. "But I do have one quick question," I added, leaning closer to the microphone. "DeAndre, did you happen to tell my sweet sister about the $3 million margin call you are currently facing from your completely failed cryptocurrency investments?" Whispers turned into loud murmurs of shock. Financial ruin was the ultimate unforgivable sin in this wealthy crowd. "Did you tell her that your shadow investors are demanding their money by the end of the week?" I asked, my voice echoing off the surrounding mansion walls. "Is that why you illegally transferred $150,000 out of our joint savings account yesterday morning? Stealing your wife's money to fund your mistress's public relations firm is a terrible way to cover a $3 million deficit." The silence was deafening. DeAndre saw his entire social standing dissolving in real time. The humiliation morphed directly into violent, explosive rage. He shoved his way through the crowd, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses. He charged toward the raised platform, his face contorted with fury. I will take everything you have, he snarled. I am taking half of Z-Tech Logistics by Friday. I took just one slow sip of my sweet tea. I cannot wait to give it to you. DeAndre did not get to swing at me. Two burly fraternity brothers aggressively grabbed his arms and forcefully hauled him backward before he could reach the wooden stage. I simply adjusted my dark sunglasses, set my empty glass down, and calmly walked out. I left the entire high society crowd buzzing with the most explosive, scandalous gossip of the entire social season. But a truly toxic family never just takes a heavy hit and peacefully retreats. By early Monday morning, their coordinated smear campaign was in full devastating effect. Pastor Thomas stood at his pulpit during the Sunday evening service and requested special prayers for a daughter who had lost her way. He painted a horrible, disturbing picture of a bitter, selfish woman, utterly consumed by corporate greed, who totally abandoned her sacred godly duties. Chloe and DeAndre took their desperate assault directly to the internet. They could not combat the harsh financial truth, so they aggressively attacked my personal character. Direct messages circulated claiming I was suffering a severe mental breakdown. But their most vicious lie was about our lack of children. We had struggled to conceive for years. Now Chloe was telling everyone I was completely infertile, and my barrenness drove me insane with jealousy. She claimed my cookout outburst was a hysterical reaction to her maternal energy. They wanted to permanently strip my credibility so everyone would see me as the inherently unstable villain and DeAndre as the exhausted survivor. I was reviewing logistics reports in my temporary downtown penthouse when the intercom buzzed. It was Jamal, DeAndre's older brother. Unlike DeAndre, who worshipped fake status, Jamal was a straight-shooting blue-collar contractor. He wore scuffed boots, faded denim, and a canvas jacket. He owned a respected construction company, but despised the superficiality consuming his brother and my parents. I instructed the concierge to send him up. Jamal stepped out of the elevator without offering empty pleasantries. He walked directly to the kitchen island, leaning his heavy hands on the granite. "You kicked the hornet nest yesterday, Zaria," he said, his deep voice rumbling. I poured him a cup of black coffee. "I just stated the facts, Jamal. If the truth feels like a hornet nest, that is not my problem." He let out a heavy sigh. "I am not here to defend him. DeAndre is a fool who threw away a queen for a cheap knockoff, but you need to know what you are walking into. DeAndre is extremely desperate. Those shady crypto investors he recently got involved with are ruthless shadow investors, unregulated and highly dangerous. They want their $3 million by the end of the month, and he is completely tapped out." "Why come tell me this?" I asked. "Because he is planning to use you as his bailout," Jamal explained. "He has always resented your self-made wealth. Since you built Z-Tech Logistics, he hated that you were the true provider. Now he sees your company as his only lifeline. He is definitely going to firmly demand Z-Tech Logistics in mediation to directly leverage your corporate assets to quickly pay off those investors." Jamal warning perfectly aligned with DeAndre's outburst at the cookout. DeAndre believed my company was a gold mine he could crack open to save his own skin. I looked closely at Jamal. He truly possessed actual, undeniable integrity. I urgently needed someone exactly like him for the final critical phase of my master plan. "I appreciate the warning, Jamal," I said, shifting to a collaborative tone. "You are the only person in that family with a working moral compass. I am going to make you an offer. I need a commercial contractor for a massive corporate build-out. I have the land secured and blueprints finalized, but I need someone who can execute the build without asking unnecessary questions about the client identity." Jamal raised his thick eyebrows. "You want to hire me to build a new logistics center during a high-stakes divorce?" "Not exactly," I replied with a mysterious smile. "The project has absolutely nothing to do with Z-Tech Logistics. It is for a completely different entity that DeAndre knows nothing about. If you take this job, you work directly for me, but your brother can never know." Jamal did not hesitate. He extended his large calloused hand. "I am a contractor, Zaria. I build things for people who pay me on time. What my idiot brother does not know will not hurt him. We shook hands, sealing a secret alliance. I told Jamal I would send the non-disclosure agreements and blueprints to his office by the end of the week. He put his cap on and stepped into the elevator. I had secured the perfect partner. While I was positioning my chess pieces, Chloe was playing the victim on the internet. By Tuesday morning, my phone was flooded with alerts. Chloe posted a deeply emotional crying video to her social media. She sat in the passenger seat of the Porsche. DeAndre could no longer afford wiping away strategically placed tears. She stared directly into the camera and delivered a masterclass in manipulation. I never wanted to bring my family trauma to the internet, she cried with fake vulnerability. But the bullying has to stop. My sister Zaria completely abandoned our family. She walked out on her dedicated husband and is trying to destroy my business out of spite. I tried to help her navigate her mental health struggles and fertility issues. But she is consumed by corporate greed, trying to ruin the people who love her most. The video went viral within hours. The comments section was a swamp, praising Chloe and condemning me as a heartless corporate monster. My parents shared the video, adding captions about praying for my soul. They were building a public narrative to justify the theft of my company. They desperately wanted the public to firmly believe that seizing my assets was a truly righteous act of family preservation. I watched the video twice, my face an unreadable mask. I did not post a rebuttal. I did not issue a statement through my company public relations department. I did not engage with the circus. I simply sat at my granite island and waited for the single phone call that actually mattered. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Elias Sterling. I answered immediately. Zaria Elias said, his voice tight with focused professional energy. The opposing counsel just formally submitted their mediation demands. Read them to me, I instructed, opening my laptop to a blank spreadsheet. It is exactly what we anticipated, Elias continued. They are playing a very aggressive hand. They are offering to let you keep the luxury Buckhead mansion and the primary checking accounts. In exchange, they are demanding 100% total ownership of Z-Tech Logistics. They want you to sign over your entire equity stake, making DeAndre the sole executive owner and primary shareholder. They are threatening to drag this through a public trial and expose your supposed mental instability if you do not agree to the transfer. I let his words wash over me. The luxury Buckhead mansion was already fully paid off and remained securely and solely in my name. The primary checking accounts were a fraction of my actual wealth. They truly thought they were being incredibly strategic and brilliant. They thought they were holding a gun to my head, forcing me to trade my corporate empire to protect my public image. They were so blinded by their greed and their desperate need for cash that they did not bother to look beneath the surface. Are they demanding an immediate transfer of liability alongside the equity? I asked, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Yes, Elias confirmed. They want a clean break. DeAndre assumes all corporate assets and all corporate liabilities effective immediately upon your signature. He wants total control. I slowly closed the laptop screen and let out a long, deep, genuine laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from deep in your soul when you realize your enemy has just gladly walked straight into quicksand. DeAndre wanted my company. He wanted the prestige, the power, and the illusion of my success. He was about to get exactly what he asked for. Zaria Elias asked, his tone shifting to mild concern. Are you all right? How do you want to respond to these demands? I stood up from the wide kitchen island and walked over to the tall floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the sprawling Atlanta skyline. The city looked wonderfully beautiful in the bright, glorious afternoon light. I am perfectly fine, Elias, I said, a dark, triumphant smirk spreading across my face. Tell their lawyers we accept the terms. Schedule the mediation for Friday morning. Are you absolutely sure about this? Elias warned. You are handing him your company. I am entirely sure, I replied. Perfect. The ultimate trap is now fully set. Friday morning arrived with a torrential downpour that washed the streets of Atlanta completely clean. The sky was a heavy slate gray, But inside the mahogany-paneled mediation boardroom at Elias Sterling Law Firm, the atmosphere crackled with a totally different kind of high-stakes storm. I sat perfectly still at the long glass conference table. Elias sat to my right, projecting a carefully calculated aura of tense professional frustration. Across from us sat the opposing team. DeAndre wore a sharply tailored navy suit that he probably bought on credit, trying his hardest to project the image of a seasoned corporate titan. Beside him sat his bulldog attorney, a man named Marcus Vance, who had a reputation for aggressive and entirely ruthless divorce settlements. And then there was Chloe. She had absolutely no legal right to be in this mediation room. She was not a party to the marriage or the logistics business. But DeAndre had insisted she be present, claiming she was his primary public relations advisor and essential emotional support. I allowed it because having her front and center for this specific moment was entirely crucial to my strategy. She sat there in a pristine white designer dress, clutching a crocodile skin handbag, looking at me with a mixture of pity and intense, profound triumph. She truly believed she had won the ultimate prize. Marcus Vance cleared his throat loudly and slid a thick, heavy stack of legal documents across the smooth glass table. "Let us get straight to the point," he began, his voice echoing sharply in the large executive room. "My client is willing to be incredibly generous today, Zaria. He recognizes the severe emotional toll this unfortunate separation has taken on you. Therefore, he is prepared to let you walk away with the primary residence in Buckhead completely uncontested. You will also retain full ownership of your personal checking and savings accounts." He paused, letting the supposed massive generosity of the offer hang heavily in the air. "In exchange for these major concessions, my client demands 100% total equity ownership of Z Tech Logistics. All shares, all operational control, all intellectual property, and all corporate assets will transfer to DeAndre immediately upon signing this binding agreement." I stared blankly at the thick stack of papers. The silence in the room stretched out tight and suffocating. DeAndre leaned back in his leather ergonomic chair, steepling his fingers together. He looked incredibly smug. He looked like a man who thought he was currently executing the greatest corporate takeover in Atlanta history. He firmly believed he was stealing my golden goose to pay off his dangerous shadow investors and secure his fake millionaire lifestyle forever. "Zaria, this is an incredibly fair deal," Marcus pressed, leaning his forearms heavily on the table. "If you decline, we are fully prepared to take this to open court. We will demand forensic accounting of every single asset. We will make your private medical history completely public. We will argue that your recent behavior demonstrates severe emotional instability, making you entirely unfit to run a major logistics corporation. We will tie you up in bitter litigation for the next 5 years." I kept my eyes locked on the documents. I needed them to believe I was entirely backed into a corner. I needed them to taste the blood in the water. I let my breathing become shallow and slightly erratic. I lowered my head, letting my shoulders slump inward, projecting total, absolute defeat. Chloe sensed my manufactured hesitation and could not resist taking the opportunity to twist the knife. She leaned far over the glass table, her expensive floral perfume invading my personal space. "Just sign it, Zaria," she said, her voice dripping with artificial toxic sweetness. "You can always go back to being a low-level manager somewhere else. You never had the flair for executive life anyway. You were always too stressed, too serious, and far too rigid. DeAndre is a natural-born leader. He knows exactly how to network and build massive empires. Let him take this heavy burden off your shoulders so you can finally focus on getting your mental health in order." Her words were meant to be the ultimate humiliating blow. She was reducing 5 years of my intense blood, sweat, and tears to a mere stressful hobby that I was completely unqualified to handle. She was aggressively trying to take my crown and place it directly on the head of the man who betrayed me. I looked up at her and allowed a single perfectly timed tear to spill over my lower lash line and track slowly down my cheek. I let my lower lip tremble, fighting back fake sobs. "Please, I whispered, my voice cracking with manufactured desperation. Please do not do this, DeAndre. Z-Tech is my entire life. I built that company from a single leased delivery truck. It is my life work. You cannot just take it away from me. I have nothing else. Elias Sterling deserves an Academy Award for his brilliant performance in that exact moment. He violently slammed his heavy leather briefcase down onto the table, causing everyone in the room to physically jump in their seats. This is absolute extortion, Elias roared, his face flushing red with expertly feigned outrage. You are stealing her lifeblood, Marcus. This is completely unacceptable. We are not signing this garbage. We will take our chances before a judge. Zarya, do not sign a single page of this blatant theft. DeAndre slammed his fist down on the glass, completely triggered by Elias' defiance. He leaned forward aggressively, his eyes burning with intense greed and a desperate need to assert his absolute dominance over the room. I am not playing games with you, Zarya, he growled, pointing a finger aggressively at my face. You are going to sign those transfer papers right now. You think you are so incredibly smart. You think you are untouchable because you built a little trucking company. But you totally forgot who you are dealing with. He stood up, pacing violently behind his chair like a caged predator sensing an easy kill. Sign it, or I drag this out in court for years and bleed you dry. I will expose every single flaw you have. I will tell the entire world how crazy you are. I will make sure no one in this city ever does business with you again. I will take the Buckhead house. I will take the personal accounts, and I will still take Z-Tech Logistics. You are entirely outmatched, Zarya. Take the damn house and walk away while you still have a safe place to sleep. I looked desperately at Elias. He shook his head vigorously, playing the part of the defeated, outraged counselor perfectly. I looked back at DeAndre. He was practically vibrating with eager anticipation. He was so absolutely certain that Z-Tech Logistics was currently worth tens of millions of dollars. He had seen the massive gross revenue reports from 2 years ago. He had seen the huge, bustling warehouse facilities. He was thoroughly convinced he was securing a massive fortune that would instantly wipe out his $3 million crypto debt and entirely fund his lavish new life with Chloe. He was completely oblivious to the real-world business mechanics. He did not know that a logistics company is only as valuable as its active commercial contracts. He did not know about the strategic maneuvers I had been quietly executing in the dark. He just saw the shiny corporate logo and desperately wanted to steal it. I let out a long, shaky, terrified breath. I wiped the single tear from my cheek using the back of my trembling hand. I reached into my purse with shaking fingers and pulled out my favorite silver fountain pen. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the heavy rain beating aggressively against the thick glass windows of the high-rise building. Do not do this, Zarya, Elias pleaded quietly, placing his hand gently over mine. It is a terrible trap. Let us fight them in court. I pulled my hand away from his, playing the utterly defeated broken wife to perfection. I have to, Elias, I whispered, my voice thick with fake sorrow. I just want it to be over. I cannot fight him anymore. I just want peace. I pulled the thick stack of transfer documents toward me. I flipped to the very last page where a dozen little yellow sticky flags indicated exactly where my signature was required. My hand visibly shook as I pressed the silver nib to the thick premium paper. I signed my name, carefully executing the strokes of my signature with agonizing slowness. Every scratch of the pen on the paper transferred more and more supposed equity out of my name and directly into his. I initialed the operational transfer clauses. I signed the absolute waiver of future corporate claims. I executed the complete handover of the corporate tax identification numbers and the primary banking access. When I signed the final page relinquishing 100% total ownership of Z-Tech Logistics to DeAndre, I dropped the pen. It clattered loudly onto the glass table. I pushed the document slowly across the surface to Marcus Vance. DeAndre let out a loud, triumphant shout that echoed wildly off the boardroom walls. He literally pumped his fist in the air like he had just won the lottery. He grabbed Chloe by the waist and pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss right in front of me. She giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck, looking over his shoulder to shoot me one final victorious, condescending smirk. Marcus Vance quickly gathered the papers, securing them safely inside his briefcase before I could supposedly change my fragile mind. He handed DeAndre a signed, certified copy of the operational transfer. "It is entirely official," Marcus said, offering a tight, professional nod. "You are now the sole owner and chief executive officer of Z-Tech Logistics." DeAndre was absolutely ecstatic. He reached into a large canvas tote bag he had brought with him and pulled out a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon champagne and 2 crystal flutes. He popped the cork right there in the middle of Elias Sterling's pristine law office. The loud pop sounded like a gunshot. Champagne foamed over the neck of the green bottle, spilling onto the carpet. He poured 2 full glasses, handing one to Chloe. "To the future," DeAndre cheered, raising his glass high. "To new empires and dropping dead weight." Chloe clinked her glass against his. "To the new CEO," she cooed, sipping the expensive bubbly. They did not even bother to offer me a glass. They simply packed up their bags, Marcus Vance leading the way out. DeAndre threw his suit jacket over his shoulder, walking out of the boardroom with the massive swagger of a newly crowned king. Chloe followed closely behind her heels, clicking sharply against the hardwood floors. "We will be sending a moving truck for the rest of my things this weekend," Zaria DeAndre called out without looking back. "Do not try to hide anything valuable." The heavy wooden door swung shut behind them, clicking firmly into the metal latch. The sound echoed with absolute finality. I sat perfectly still for exactly 5 seconds. I listened to the sound of their fading footsteps moving down the carpeted hallway toward the elevators. I waited until I was absolutely certain they were entirely gone. My shoulders, which had been slumped in defeat, slowly rolled back. I sat up straight, straightening the lapels of my charcoal gray suit. The manufactured sorrow completely vanished from my face, like smoke blowing away in the wind. My trembling hands stopped shaking entirely, becoming as steady as carved stone. I reached up and casually wiped the last trace of the fake tear from my cheek. Elias Sterling let out a massive breath he seemed to have been holding for 20 minutes. He reached under the conference table and pulled out a crystal decanter of 20-year-old scotch and 2 heavy tumbler glasses. He poured a generous measure of the amber liquid into each glass, sliding one across the table to me. He sat back in his chair, loosening his silk tie. He looked at me with a mixture of absolute awe and mild terror. "They have no idea, do they?" Elias asked, taking a slow sip of the expensive scotch. I picked up my glass, watching the amber liquid swirl around the heavy crystal bottom. I thought about Jamal securing the new commercial contracting job. I thought about the $3 million crypto debt hanging directly over DeAndre's head. I thought about the mountain of operational liabilities DeAndre had just gleefully assumed total legal responsibility for. I took a slow, appreciative sip of the smooth-burning scotch and let out a sharp, genuine laugh that filled the empty boardroom. Not a clue, I smiled. By the time Elias and I finally exited the towering glass and steel high-rise office building, DeAndre had already hastily updated all of his various professional online networking profiles. I sat comfortably in the cool, quiet back seat of my hired chauffeured town car, silently watching my bright phone screen refresh over and over again. DeAndre proudly posted a heavily filtered and highly edited photograph directly on his public LinkedIn feed. He was posing proudly, standing right in front of a sleek rented private jet, wearing a sharp tailored suit and a remarkably arrogant expression on his smug face. The lengthy caption proudly declared his new role as Chief Executive Officer of Z-Tech Logistics, promising to bring innovative leadership to the transportation sector. He boldly tagged Chloe, who immediately commented with a dozen fire emojis and a long message calling him a visionary business titan. It was a masterclass in absolute delusion. He truly believed signing a piece of paper magically transferred my business acumen directly into his empty head. I locked my phone and watched the heavy rain wash over the dark Atlanta streets. He was moving incredibly fast, trying to establish absolute public dominance before anyone could ever question the sudden transition. He wanted to humiliate me and elevate himself simultaneously. But the public victory lap was just the opening act of his completely devastating downfall. Later that evening, the loud celebration quickly escalated. Chloe rented out the VIP section of a highly exclusive rooftop lounge in Midtown Atlanta. I did not physically need to be present there to see the wild festivities unfold, because her entire desperate social circle immediately broadcasted the party live on every single social media platform available. I sat in a dimly lit private booth at a quiet upscale steakhouse across town, watching the live feeds. Jamal slid into the leather booth opposite me. He pulled off his heavy canvas jacket and ordered a dark, stout beer. He looked at my phone screen where Chloe was taking tequila shots, shouting about upgrading to the executive lifestyle. Jamal shook his head in absolute disgust. They are happily spending money they do not actually have to celebrate a victory they did not actually win, he rumbled, taking a long pull from his cold drink. DeAndre took out another high-interest loan just to fund this ridiculous party. He told his shadow investors that he now officially owns a multi-million-dollar logistics firm and promised to pay their massive $3 million margin call by next Tuesday. They gave him a short temporary extension based on that arrogant LinkedIn post alone. I smiled, slicing into my perfectly cooked steak. He is building his entire magnificent castle on shifting quicksand, Jamal, and he is dancing right on the very edge of the deep sinkhole. Jamal leaned forward, his thick forearms resting heavily on the polished mahogany table. He looked around the quiet restaurant, making absolutely sure no one was listening to us. I started laying the foundation at your new site today, he said, keeping his voice low. My crew is working double shifts, but I need to ask you a question. You gave him your entire company today. I saw the official legal filings. You handed him the literal keys to the castle. I know DeAndre is a complete fool, but you just gave a fool a loaded weapon. How exactly does losing your life work directly translate into winning? I set my fork down and picked up my heavy crystal water glass. Z-Tech Logistics was my life work. Jamal? I agreed, taking a slow, thoughtful sip. 5 years ago, it was a highly profitable, well-oiled machine. But you have to deeply understand exactly how my entire family operates. My parents never ever saw my success as my own. They exclusively viewed it as a communal family asset to be constantly exploited. 3 years ago, Pastor Thomas ran his megachurch into crippling debt, making terrible investments in a second worship center, while the bank threatened to foreclose on everything. He came to me crying, begging, and claiming it would destroy our family legacy and humiliate us in front of the entire congregation. He completely manipulated my deepest sense of duty. My mother actively guilt-tripped me relentlessly every single day. So I took massive corporate loans under Z-Tech Logistics to bail out his church, leveraging my company to save his reputation. Jamal's eyes widened in pure absolute shock. You completely mortgaged your business for a church. I felt I had to. I explained, my voice hardening. But that was the exact moment I realized they would gladly bleed me dry to maintain their fake status. They forcefully made me shoulder their massive financial burdens while simultaneously treating me like a bitter, endless disappointment. I knew right then that Z-Tech Logistics was a permanently compromised entity. So I slowly started building a completely new, uncompromised empire right in the deep shadows. I quietly transferred my best clients, my most lucrative contracts, and all my clean capital into a brand new, completely hidden holding company. The one you are building the new facility for right now. I deliberately left Z-Tech operating just enough to easily maintain the outward illusion of massive corporate wealth. It strongly looked like a thriving corporation from the outside, but the inside was entirely hollowed out. I systematically gutted the entire company. DeAndre did not buy a strong castle today, Jamal. He bought a beautifully painted wooden facade standing right in front of a massive toxic dump. Jamal leaned back in the booth, a slow, terrifying realization finally dawning on his face. What exactly did he officially sign today, Zaria? I pulled a neatly folded document from my designer handbag and slowly slid it across the smooth table. I gave him exactly what he aggressively demanded, I said smoothly. 100% total unadulterated ownership, total liability, total exposure. Z-Tech Logistics holds zero liquid assets. The corporate bank accounts he fought so hard to seize have a combined total of $1,200. But the liabilities are absolutely staggering. Because my parents kept demanding money and DeAndre kept secretly siphoning cash for his risky crypto investments, the company fell drastically behind on federal obligations. Tech holds exactly $5 million in unpaid federal tax liabilities. Jamal choked on his dark beer, coughing violently into his cloth napkin. $5 million. I nodded, tapping the official document. And that is definitely not all. Because I was secretly preparing to dissolve the company anyway, I totally stopped fulfilling our lowest performing delivery contracts exactly 3 months ago. There are currently 3 massive pending class action lawsuits, from angry vendors suing for breached contracts and operational negligence. Those multiple lawsuits total another $4 million in brutal damages. DeAndre truly thought he was getting a golden ticket today, but he legally signed a contract assuming 100% personal liability for a completely hollow shell company drowning in $9 million of inescapable debt. And because he stubbornly insisted on a clean break to severely punish me, my name was completely legally removed from every single corporate account and liability ledger this morning. Jamal stared at me with pure, unfiltered respect. He shook his head, letting out a low, booming laugh. You handed him a ticking bomb, and he popped expensive champagne to celebrate. I smiled, raising my glass. He desperately wanted to be the boss, Jamal. Now he gets to handle the boss-level problems. The trap was permanently sprung. Across town, the loud rooftop party was finally winding down. DeAndre and Chloe happily left the club, stumbling slightly from the expensive liquor and the intoxicating high of their perceived ultimate victory. They took a luxury black car service directly to the brand-new downtown penthouse apartment DeAndre had leased just 2 days ago. He had signed the expensive lease using the Z-Tech Logistics corporate documents as proof of his massive impending income. They walked through the sleek marble lobby of the luxury high-rise building, acting exactly like they owned the entire city. DeAndre carried Chloe over the threshold of the penthouse, laughing loudly as they dropped their bags onto the pristine hardwood floor. The apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows, showing the glittering city lights below. DeAndre walked over to the modern wet bar to pour them another celebratory drink. "This is exactly where we belong, baby," he boasted, handing Chloe a glass. "No more hiding." Suddenly, a heavy knock echoed through the quiet apartment. DeAndre frowned, setting his glass down. "Who could that be at this hour?" he muttered, walking toward the wooden door. He swung the heavy door wide open. Standing in the brightly lit hallway was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a cheap gray suit. It was definitely not a congratulatory delivery. The process server handed him a thick stack of papers. "You have been served by the IRS." DeAndre stared at the man in the gray suit. The heavy stack of documents felt like a lead weight in his trembling hands. The process server did not wait for a response. He turned around and walked down the plush hallway, leaving DeAndre frozen in the doorway. Chloe walked over holding her champagne flute, her perfect smile faltering slightly as she noticed his pale, stricken face. She asked who was at the door, but DeAndre could not physically speak. He slowly closed the heavy wooden door and walked back to the kitchen island, dropping the thick stack of federal documents onto the marble surface. The bold black letters at the top of the first page screamed official federal tax lien. $5 million in unpaid corporate taxes, massive penalties for severe operational negligence, immediate federal garnishment of all connected assets. Because he had arrogantly demanded a clean break and assumed total 100% ownership of Z-Tech Logistics, he was now the sole legal guarantor. The IRS did not care about his fake millionaire aesthetic. They only cared about the signature he proudly blasted over his LinkedIn profile just hours earlier. Panic immediately seized his chest. He pulled his phone from his pocket and frantically opened his personal banking app. He navigated straight to the offshore safety net account where he had proudly stashed the $150,000 he stole from my personal joint checking account. A bright red error message flashed across his screen. Account frozen. He refreshed the app repeatedly, his thumb striking the glass screen with increasing violence. Zero available balance. The federal government had already executed an immediate garnishment of every single account tied to his Social Security number. The stolen money was completely gone. His personal savings were entirely wiped out. He was completely broke. DeAndre did not sleep that night. By 8 in the morning, he was speeding through Atlanta traffic, running red lights in a desperate panic. He slammed his car into a space and sprinted into the glass high-rise where Elias Sterling ran his firm. He bypassed the receptionist, ignoring her startled protests, and barged directly into the heavy mahogany doors of Elias' private office. Elias was sitting peacefully behind his desk, sipping espresso and reading a legal brief. He did not flinch when DeAndre violently slammed the federal documents onto the polished wood. "This is absolute fraud," DeAndre screamed, his voice cracking with unhinged rage. "Your client set me up. Zaria deliberately handed me a bankrupt company drowning in federal tax debt. She completely lied about the assets. I want this entire mediation agreement immediately reversed, or I am reporting both of you to the Bar Association." Elias calmly placed a silver bookmark in his brief and closed it. He took a deliberate sip of his espresso, setting the porcelain cup down with a soft click. He looked at DeAndre with an expression of pure pity. "There was absolutely no fraud committed here," DeAndre Elias stated, his voice perfectly smooth and detached. "You were provided with every single operational ledger. You chose not to read them. You were so utterly blinded by your own massive ego that you skipped the standard due diligence period." DeAndre slammed both fists onto the desk, leaning forward aggressively. "She totally manipulated the situation," he yelled, spit flying from his lips. "She completely faked that crying routine to make me think the company was worth millions. It was a setup and you helped her execute it." Elias shook his head and reached for a remote control resting on his desk. He pressed a single button. A flat-screen television mounted on the wall instantly hummed to life. High-definition security footage filled the screen, showing the exact mediation session from yesterday afternoon. The clear audio echoed through the office. DeAndre heard his own arrogant voice demanding total equity. He watched himself pacing behind his chair, acting like a ruthless predator. He watched Zaria crying, begging him not to take her life work. He watched himself threatening to drag her through a public trial if she did not sign over the company. He watched himself pop champagne holding the signed transfer documents. "You demanded the company," Sir Elias said, gesturing toward the frozen image. "My client literally begged you not to take it. You aggressively insisted on assuming all corporate assets and all liabilities. The contract is completely airtight. It is legally binding and entirely irreversible. You successfully bullied your way into sole ownership of a sinking ship. Congratulations on your new acquisition." DeAndre stumbled backward as if physically struck. The reality of his complete destruction finally crushed his massive ego. "Get out of my office," DeAndre Elias commanded, pointing toward the door. "You have federal agents to deal with now." DeAndre stumbled out of the building, feeling like he could not breathe. His phone suddenly vibrated, buzzing with the intensity of an angry hornet. He pulled it out, staring at the encrypted international number. The shadow crypto investors. His hands shook violently as he accepted the call. DeAndre, a low voice murmured, "We saw your impressive announcement regarding your corporate acquisition. Since you are now the owner of a major empire, we expect our $3 million transferred by 5 this evening." "Please listen to me," he begged, pacing frantically on the sidewalk. "The accounts are frozen by the government. I need more time. We do not do extensions, DeAndre. 5 this evening. If the funds are not secured, we will collect our debt in person." The line went dead. He sprinted to his car, speeding back to the penthouse. Chloe was sitting on a plush white sofa, scrolling happily through her social media feeds. She looked up smiling as he burst through the door. DeAndre dropped to his knees, grabbing her hands desperately. Chloe, I need your help, he pleaded. The logistics company is a total bust. The IRS seized everything, and my crypto investors are threatening to come after me today. I need the capital from your firm right now to pay them off. Chloe slowly pulled her hands out of his grip. Her bright smile vanished completely, replaced by a cold mask of self-preservation. What are you talking about, DeAndre? She snapped, stepping away. You told me you were a millionaire. You told me Z-Tech Logistics was going to fund my expansion. Now you want me to empty my accounts to pay off your gambling debts. I gave you the startup money for that firm, DeAndre yelled, scrambling to his feet. I stole $150,000 from Zaria to buy your office space. You owe me that money. If I do not pay these men today, they will ruin me. Chloe crossed her arms over her chest, showing the first real cracks in their toxic relationship. That money is for my business, DeAndre, she yelled back, her voice echoing harshly in the penthouse. That money was an investment in my career. I am not draining my corporate accounts to save you from your own stupid mistakes. You promised me a luxury lifestyle and status. If you cannot provide that, then figure out your own problems. She turned her back on him, dismissing his terror. Chloe could not stand to look at his pathetic, crumbling expression for a single second longer. She grabbed her designer handbag and dark sunglasses, storming toward the front door to escape the suffocating stress of his completely unhinged financial meltdown. She desperately needed to get far away from his toxic, failing energy. She decided to head straight to her brand-new public relations office located in a prestigious commercial high-rise building downtown. She had proudly spent the last 3 weeks bragging to her elite social circle about the panoramic corner suite she secured using the influx of stolen startup cash. She rode the private elevator up to the 14th floor, already mentally composing a vicious social media post about protecting her hard-earned peace. The shiny silver elevator doors slid smoothly open. Chloe confidently stepped out onto the polished marble floor, but her fast, aggressive strut came to an immediate, devastating halt. She stood completely frozen in the exact middle of the quiet corridor, staring in absolute disbelief at her brand-new corporate headquarters. A massive, heavy industrial steel chain was wrapped tightly around the 2 sleek, custom glass double doors, secured firmly with a massive brass padlock. Smeared directly across the center of the pristine, transparent glass blocking her beautiful golden corporate logo was a bright neon red legal document. She dropped her designer handbag, ignoring the loud thud it made against the cold, hard floor as she stepped closer to read the terrifying bold print. It was a formal commercial eviction notice issued directly by the Building Management Authority. The supposedly secure startup funds had never actually cleared the bank. The stolen money was completely locked. The grand, flawless power couple illusion was finally and entirely over forever. Chloe stared at the bright red eviction notice plastered across the thick glass doors of her new public relations headquarters. Her mouth hung open. The heavy steel chain wrapped tightly around the handles felt like a direct insult. She had curated every detail of this suite, positioning expensive Italian furniture to face the Atlanta skyline. She had mailed hundreds of invitations for her grand opening next Friday. Now she was staring at a massive padlock. She snatched her handbag off the marble floor. Her heart hammered as she marched toward the elevators. She pressed the button repeatedly, her manicured fingernail tapping aggressively against the plastic. When the doors parted on the ground floor, she stormed past the security desk, ignoring the guard, and marched into the building management office. Helen, the manager, sat behind a curved desk, typing quietly. She looked up, adjusting her glasses as Chloe burst through the door, practically vibrating with unhinged rage. "I demand to know what is going on," Chloe screamed, slamming her palms against the desk. "Someone put a fake eviction notice on my suite. Take that chain off my doors. I paid 6 months' rent in advance. I signed a binding commercial lease. You cannot lock me out." Helen did not flinch. She removed her hands from her keyboard. She looked at Chloe with an expression of cold detachment. "You did not pay 6 months' rent in advance," Helen stated calmly. "You attempted to pay rent using a fraudulent wire transfer." The bank reversed the transaction. That is a lie, Chloe yelled, her face flushing crimson. The money was wired directly from my partner accounts. The funds were fully secured. Helen slid a single sheet of paper across the surface. Your lease was terminated at 8 o'clock this morning, she explained. The federal authorities contacted our compliance department last night. The specific funds you used were flagged by a federal audit as stolen marital assets. Because the money was unlawfully siphoned from a frozen joint account under investigation by the IRS, the transaction was voided. We do not lease commercial real estate to entities engaging in federal financial fraud. Chloe felt the blood drain entirely from her face. The $150,000 DeAndre stole. The money he promised was untraceable. The money she used to launch her fake corporate empire was gone. The feds had it. You need to vacate the premises immediately, Helen continued, her tone dropping. The security guards have instructions to escort you off the property if you do not leave. Chloe stumbled backward, clutching her handbag. She ran out of the management office. She pulled her phone from her bag, her hands shaking violently. She ignored the missed calls from DeAndre. Instead, she dialed the only person who always blindly validated her worst behavior. Vivian arrived downtown less than 20 minutes later, pulling her sedan illegally into the loading zone. She rushed into the lobby wearing a crisp linen suit, her face drawn into a mask of maternal outrage. Chloe was sitting on a bench near the security desk, sobbing. Vivian rushed over, wrapping her arms aggressively around her daughter. She glared at the security guards, daring them to intervene. What happened, Chloe? Vivian demanded, her voice echoing loudly. Tell me exactly who did this to you. Chloe choked back a sob, wiping her ruined mascara. The building manager locked my doors, Mom. She said the money DeAndre gave me was flagged by the feds as stolen marital assets. They terminated my lease. My grand opening is ruined. Everything is ruined. Vivian's jaw tightened. She ignored the fact that DeAndre had stolen the funds. She ignored the reality of the federal audit. Instead, she redirected all her toxic fury toward her favorite permanent scapegoat. This is Zaria doing, Vivian hissed, smoothing Chloe's hair. I know it. That spiteful, jealous girl could not stand seeing you thrive. She must have tipped off the federal investigators out of malicious spite to sabotage your grand opening. She wants you to fail. Chloe sniffled, leaning heavily into her mother's side. But what am I going to do, Mom? I sent out all the invitations. I told everyone in our social circle about this office. I will be completely humiliated. Do not worry, baby, Vivian cooed, her voice hardening with arrogant resolve. We are not going to accept this ridiculous treatment from some low-level manager. We have profound social influence in this city. Your father and I know how to handle these bureaucratic hurdles. We are going to march past that desk and demand to speak directly to the building owner. We will explain the simple misunderstanding and have your doors unlocked today. Vivian stood up, pulling Chloe firmly to her feet. She marched confidently toward the main reception desk, projecting the arrogant authority of a woman who believed the entire world existed solely to cater to her demands. I need to speak with the owner of this building immediately, Vivian demanded, slapping her hand flat on the desk. My daughter is an elite corporate tenant here, and she has been treated with shocking disrespect. We demand a meeting with the head of Vanguard Real Estate Trust. The receptionist, a young man in a sharp suit, looked at Vivian with mild surprise. He glanced at his computer monitor, checking the daily visitor log. I am sorry, Mom, he replied politely, but the chief executive officer of Vanguard Real Estate Trust does not take walk-in meetings. I am not a walk-in, Vivian snapped, leaning closer. I am Vivian Thomas. My husband is Pastor Thomas of the First Fellowship Ministry. We bring massive value to this community, and we will not be dismissed. Call the executive suite immediately and tell the owner we are coming up to resolve a lease dispute. The receptionist hesitated, looking at the two angry women standing before him. He picked up his desk phone and pressed a single button. He spoke quietly into the receiver. Chloe watched him nervously, her stomach twisting with anxiety. After a brief moment, the receptionist offered a tight, professional smile. The CEO will see you now. he said, gesturing toward a private bank of elevators. Take the elevator directly to the penthouse. Vivian grabbed Chloe's hand, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. You see, baby? She whispered as they walked confidently toward the polished metal doors. You just have to project authority. We will have this entire misunderstanding sorted out in 5 minutes. They stepped into the private executive elevator. The doors closed silently, gliding them smoothly up to the highest floor of the massive skyscraper. Chloe adjusted her dress, trying to calm her racing heart. She practiced her best professional smile, ready to charm whoever sat behind the big desk. The elevator chimed, opening directly into a stunning reception area. The penthouse level was a masterpiece of modern luxury. Dark hardwood floors gleamed under warm, recessed lighting. Massive abstract paintings hung on crisp white walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed, spectacular view of the entire city. It screamed wealth, power, and unyielding control. A silent security guard directed them down a wide hallway toward a set of frosted glass doors. The letters Vanguard Real Estate Trust were etched deeply into the glass in elegant silver font. Vivian pushed the doors open, strutting inside with Chloe trailing behind. The boardroom was massive, easily twice the size of Elias' Sterling office. A long, beautiful table carved from a single slab of dark walnut dominated the center of the room. At the far end of the table, a high-backed black leather executive chair sat facing the windows, completely turned away from the door. "Excuse me," Vivian announced, her voice loud and demanding as she stepped fully into the impressive room. "We are here to discuss a severe error regarding my daughter's commercial lease on the 14th floor." The heavy leather chair slowly swiveled around. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting calmly on the smooth walnut table. I wore a pristine, tailored white blazer, my dark hair pulled back into a sharp, flawless bun. I looked at my mother and sister, watching the color drain from their shocked, horrified faces. Chloe dropped her crocodile skin handbag again. It hit the floor with a dull, heavy thud. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at me, her eyes wide with pure terror. Vivian staggered backward, gripping the edge of the conference table to steady herself. Her confident, arrogant posture completely shattered, collapsing into a pile of broken, pathetic confusion. "Zaria," she gasped, her voice trembling violently. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, letting the silence stretch out, allowing the absolute devastating reality of their situation to completely crush them. "Welcome to Vanguard Real Estate," I said, my voice echoing cleanly in the massive, beautiful room. "I am the sole founder and CEO. You have exactly 20 minutes to get your fake Prada bags out of my building before I have you arrested. Where does your family currently stand? Do you want to see how DeAndre and Pastor Thomas react when the rest of their house of cards collapses?" Chloe screamed, staring blindly at the neon red eviction notice taped tightly to her double glass doors. She snatched her expensive handbag off the polished marble floor and sprinted desperately toward the elevators. Her heart hammered violently against her ribs as she rode down to the main lobby. She bypassed the front security desk entirely and marched directly into the building management office like a hurricane. The property manager, a stern woman named Helen, sat calmly behind a massive curved mahogany desk. "I demand to know exactly what is going on here," Chloe shrieked loudly, slamming both palms flat down. "Someone put a fake eviction notice on my suite. You need to remove that heavy chain immediately. I paid 6 months of rent in advance. I signed a binding commercial lease." Helen did not flinch. She slowly removed her hands from her silver keyboard and looked at Chloe with pure, absolute detachment. "You did not pay 6 months of rent in advance," Miss Thomas, Helen stated coldly. "You attempted to pay your expensive rent using a highly fraudulent wire transfer. The bank completely reversed the illicit transaction. That is a massive lie," Chloe yelled, her flawless face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. "The money was wired directly from my partner accounts. The funds were fully cleared and totally secured." Helen pulled a single sheet of paper from a pristine folder, sliding it across the desk. "Your lease was permanently terminated at 8 o'clock this morning," she explained, her voice dropping slightly. Federal authorities contacted our corporate compliance department late last night. The specific funds you used to secure the suite were explicitly flagged as stolen marital assets by a rigorous federal audit. Because the money was unlawfully siphoned from a frozen joint account currently under severe investigation by the IRS, the entire transaction was voided. We strictly do not lease premium commercial real estate to entities engaging in federal financial fraud. Chloe felt the warm blood drain entirely from her face. The $150,000 DeAndre stole. The stolen money he foolishly promised was completely untraceable. The money she happily used to confidently launch her fake corporate empire was completely gone. The feds had seized it all. You genuinely need to vacate the lobby premises immediately, Helen continued, narrowing her eyes. The front security guards have strict instructions to physically escort you off the property if you do not willingly leave. Chloe stumbled backward, clutching her expensive handbag tightly against her chest. She ran blindly out of the quiet management office. She pulled her bright phone from her bag, her hands shaking violently. She deliberately ignored the frantic missed calls from DeAndre. Instead, she frantically dialed the exact only person who always blindly validated her absolute worst behavior. Vivian arrived downtown less than 20 short minutes later, pulling her sleek sedan illegally into the commercial loading zone. She rushed through the glass lobby doors wearing a crisp white linen suit, her face already drawn into a tight mask of pure maternal outrage. Chloe was sitting slumped on a leather bench near the main security desk, crying hysterically into her perfectly manicured hands. Vivian rushed over, wrapping her arms aggressively around her sobbing golden daughter. She glared hatefully at the tall security guards, silently daring them to intervene. "What happened, Chloe?" Vivian demanded, her shrill voice echoing loudly across the empty lobby. "Tell me exactly who did this to you." Chloe choked back a loud sob, wiping her completely ruined, expensive mascara. "The terrible building manager permanently locked my beautiful doors, Mom," she wailed. "She coldly told me the massive funds DeAndre gave me were officially flagged by the greedy feds as stolen marital assets. They brutally terminated my lease. My incredible grand opening is ruined. Everything is completely ruined." Vivian's jaw tightened instantly. She completely ignored the glaring, ugly fact that DeAndre had actually stolen the corporate funds. She deliberately ignored the stark reality of the federal financial audit. Instead, she immediately redirected all her toxic, venomous fury directly toward her absolute favorite permanent family scapegoat. "This is definitely Zaria doing," Vivian hissed angrily, smoothing Chloe's tangled blonde hair. "I just absolutely know it. That spiteful, bitterly jealous girl could not possibly stand seeing you happily thrive. She must have secretly tipped off the federal investigators out of pure malicious jealousy to completely sabotage your grand opening. She desperately wants you to publicly fail." Chloe sniffled loudly, leaning heavily into her mother's side. "But what am I going to actually do, Mom? I proudly sent out all the expensive invitations. I confidently told absolutely everyone in our elite social circle about this luxury office. I will be completely, utterly humiliated." "Do not worry, baby," Vivian cooed gently, her voice suddenly hardening with fierce, arrogant resolve. "We are definitely not going to quietly accept this ridiculous, abusive treatment from some lowly, insignificant property manager. We have profound, undeniable influence in this city. Your father and I intimately know exactly how to gracefully handle these petty bureaucratic hurdles. We will proudly talk to the building owner. We will gracefully explain the simple minor misunderstanding, and we will have your suite doors completely unlocked today." Vivian stood up, pulling Chloe firmly to her feet. She marched confidently toward the main reception desk, projecting the arrogant, supreme authority of a powerful woman who truly believed the entire world existed solely to flawlessly cater to her every demand. "I deeply need to fiercely speak with the owner of this building immediately," Vivian demanded, slapping her hand flat on the desk. "My beautiful daughter is an elite corporate tenant here, and she has been treated with shocking, disgusting disrespect. We demand an urgent meeting with the owner of Vanguard Real Estate Trust, the conglomerate that owns this high-rise. The lobby receptionist, a young man in a sharp, tailored suit, looked at Vivian with mild, polite surprise. He quickly glanced at his computer monitor, checking the daily executive visitor log. "I am incredibly sorry, Lee." "Ma'am," he replied very politely. "But the chief executive officer of Vanguard Real Estate Trust strictly does not take unscheduled walk-in meetings." "I am absolutely not a walk-in," Vivian snapped, leaning aggressively closer. "I am Vivian Thomas. My husband is Pastor Thomas of the First Fellowship Ministry. We bring massive divine value to this community, and we will not be casually dismissed. Call the top executive suite immediately and tell the owner we are coming up to powerfully resolve a commercial lease dispute." The receptionist hesitated briefly, looking carefully at the two intensely angry women standing impatiently before him. He quietly picked up his desk phone and pressed a single glowing button. He spoke very softly into the black receiver. Chloe watched him nervously, her stomach constantly twisting with growing anxiety. After a brief quiet moment, the young receptionist offered a surprisingly tight professional smile. "The owner will apparently see you both now," he said, gesturing smoothly toward a secure private bank of sleek elevators. "They are expecting you now. Please simply take the middle elevator directly up to the penthouse boardroom." Vivian grabbed Chloe's delicate hand, a wildly triumphant, proud smile quickly spreading across her heavily powdered face. "You see, baby," she whispered loudly as they walked confidently together toward the polished metal elevator doors. "You merely just have to project absolute unbreakable authority. We will certainly have this entire petty misunderstanding completely sorted out in exactly 5 very short minutes." They eagerly stepped into the secure private executive elevator. The heavy steel doors closed silently, gliding them incredibly smoothly up to the very highest floor of the massive gleaming skyscraper. Chloe nervously adjusted her tight dress, desperately trying to somehow calm her rapidly racing, panicked heart. She mentally practiced her absolute best sweet professional smile completely, ready to flawlessly charm whoever sat behind the big important desk. The elevator chimed, opening directly into a stunning, gorgeous reception area. The penthouse level was an undisputed masterpiece of stark, modern corporate luxury. A completely silent, serious security guard efficiently directed them down a wide, pristine hallway toward a heavy set of frosted glass double doors. The bold, impressive letters, Vanguard Real Estate Trust, were deeply etched right into the clear glass in a highly elegant silver-flowing font. Vivian pushed the large doors forcefully open, strutting arrogantly inside with Chloe meekly trailing close behind. The expansive boardroom was truly massive, easily twice the size of Elias Sterling, busy law office. A long table masterfully carved from a solid slab of dark walnut dominated the exact center of the quiet large room. At the far end of the table, a sleek black leather executive chair sat facing the windows. The heavy chair slowly swiveled around. It was Zaria. Zaria smiles at her mother and sister. "Welcome to Vanguard Real Estate. I am the sole founder and CEO. You have exactly 20 minutes to get your fake Prada bags out of my building before I have you arrested for trespassing." Vivian and Chloe did not say another single word. They turned and fled the penthouse like frightened animals, scrambling back into the executive elevator in total defeated silence. By noon the following day, the explosive news of Chloe's highly public eviction and Zaria's staggering hidden wealth had completely saturated the Atlanta elite gossip circles. High society text chains and exclusive country club dining rooms buzzed relentlessly with the scandalous details of the Thomas family's sudden disgraceful fall from grace. The flawless golden illusion was rapidly disintegrating for absolutely everyone to intimately see. Humiliated and desperate, Pastor Thomas convened an emergency closed-door meeting with the First Fellowship Ministry Board of Deacons later that evening. The church boardroom was a monument to excessive religious opulence, featuring a massive mahogany table, imported Italian leather chairs, and a crystal chandelier that cost more than a modest residential home. Thomas stood at the head of the long table, sweating profusely under his tailored suit jacket, while Vivian sat rigidly beside him, clutching a tissue and playing the familiar role of the spiritually besieged, dedicated matriarch. Brothers, we are facing an unprecedented spiritual attack on this blessed ministry and my family. Thomas began, his deep voice vibrating with practiced theatrical emotion. The enemy is actively trying to destroy us through malicious secular litigation. My beautiful daughter Chloe and her husband DeAndre are facing severe, unjust legal persecution. I am officially requesting an immediate emergency loan of $2 million from the Church Building Fund to cover their mounting legal fees and firmly secure Chloe business assets. We must prioritize family preservation above all else to firmly maintain the moral integrity of this great congregation. The 7 senior deacons exchanged highly uncomfortable glances. The building fund was sacred money raised directly from the dedicated working-class congregation over the past long decade. Pastor, with all due respect, a senior deacon named Marcus countered slowly. That money is strictly legally allocated for the new community youth center. We cannot simply redirect millions of dollars to bail out your son-in-law personal tax debts. The entire congregation would loudly demand a full, independent financial audit. Thomas slammed his heavy fist down hard onto the mahogany table, his round face flushing a deep, angry purple. I am the absolute shepherd of this flock. He bellowed, his pastoral charm instantly vanishing, completely replaced by tyrannical rage. I built this entire ministry from a tiny storefront into a global megachurch. I demand absolute, unconditional loyalty and immediate financial compliance to protect my good family name. Before Marcus could formulate a rational response, the heavy locked oak doors of the boardroom suddenly clicked, unlocked, and swung wide open. The large room fell into absolute, stunned, total silence. I stepped calmly across the threshold, wearing a sharp, tailored black suit, my expensive heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floor. I had bypassed the strict security protocols entirely, using the master access codes I secretly possessed. The shocked deacons stared at me in total bewilderment, while Vivian let out a sharp, terrified, loud gasp, shrinking back deep into her leather chair. Zarya! What in God's name are you doing here? Thomas roared loudly, his face contorting with absolute intense fury. This is a highly classified private board meeting. You were absolutely not invited to be here. Get out of my church immediately. I did not stop walking until I reached the exact opposite end of the long mahogany table. I stood perfectly straight, holding his furious, angry gaze with cold, absolute, unwavering detachment. You are a complete and total disgrace to this prominent family, Thomas continued, shouting loudly, pointing a violently trembling finger across the table. How dare you maliciously humiliate your own sweet sister and falsely evict her from her office? How dare you cruelly abandon your good husband when he desperately needed your financial support? You are honestly nothing but a bitter, vindictive failure who wants to see her own flesh and blood suffer. Building security is coming right now to forcefully throw you out onto the street. I reached smoothly into my slim leather briefcase and pulled out a massive, thick black financial ledger. I lifted it high and dropped it directly onto the polished mahogany table. The heavy, loud thud echoed loudly like a gunshot through the completely silent boardroom. I did not come here to humiliate them, I said, my voice slicing cleanly through the heavy, tense air like a sharp scalpel. I came here to officially foreclose on you. Thomas froze instantly, his hand dropping slowly to his side. The aggressive dark color drained instantly from his face, leaving him looking incredibly pale and suddenly very old. The confused deacons leaned forward, staring intently at the thick black ledger resting on the table. What exactly are you talking about? Zarya Marcus asked, his brow furrowed in deep, concerned confusion. Foreclose on what? I looked directly at Marcus, but directed my harsh words to the entire stunned room. 3 short years ago, this massive megachurch was secretly facing complete total financial ruin. The heavy mortgage was severely delinquent, and the local bank was actively preparing to seize the entire property. Pastor Thomas had quietly, illegally embezzled over $4 million from the vital operational accounts to fully fund his lavish personal lifestyle, his luxury sports cars, his private island vacations, and his expensive tailored Italian suits. "That is an outrageous, slanderous, demonic lie," Thomas shouted loudly, his voice cracking with pure, intense panic. "Do not listen to a single word this crazy, disturbed girl says." "Open the ledger, Marcus," I instructed calmly and firmly. Marcus reached out slowly and flipped open the heavy black cover. His eyes scanned the top pages and his jaw visibly dropped open. The other deacons quickly crowded tightly around him, their expressions rapidly shifting from confusion to absolute pure horror as they read the meticulously documented bank transfers, fake vendor invoices, and hidden offshore shell accounts. When Pastor Thomas realized he was actually going to federal prison for massive wire fraud and total tax evasion, he severely panicked. I continued pacing slowly along the far edge of the long table. He quietly and highly illegally sold the actual physical land this megachurch securely sits on to a private commercial buyer. He sold the holy ground beneath your feet for $5 million to cover his stolen tracks and quietly pay off the impending bank foreclosure. He smugly thought he sold it to a massive, faceless corporate conglomerate that would just happily, blindly collect the monthly ground lease rent indefinitely, forever. Thomas gripped the back of his tall chair, his knuckles turning completely white. He looked exactly like a guilty man standing nervously on the trapdoor of the execution gallows. "He ignorantly sold it to Vanguard Real Estate Trust," I revealed coldly, watching the devastating, crushing realization firmly hit the older deacons. "I am Vanguard Real Estate. I personally solely purchased the land using my own private capital. I covered his massive, fraudulent, dirty debts to temporarily protect this innocent congregation from being quickly locked out of their own beloved sanctuary. I actually legally own the ground you are currently standing on right now. I own the parking lot. I own every single inch of dirt beneath this entire massive building." Vivian buried her face deeply in her shaking hands, sobbing loudly as the pristine, perfect, flawless illusion of her holy pastoral life officially, completely, permanently shattered into millions of tiny, broken pieces. "You constantly called me a pathetic, bitter failure, Dad," I said, looking directly into his terrified, wide, panicked eyes. "You constantly, loudly told absolutely everyone I was never a good enough wife to a man who actively stole from me. You happily allowed my toxic sister to treat me like worthless garbage while you constantly, desperately begged for my hard-earned financial help. You proudly stood at the holy pulpit every single Sunday loudly preaching about high integrity while secretly stealing millions from struggling single mothers and poor working families to fully fund your greedy, massive, arrogant ego." I stepped closer to the table, my voice dropping to a low, extremely dangerous pitch. "But I am the exact and only solitary reason you are not currently sitting rotting in a federal prison cell. I actively protected your pathetic dark secret for 3 long years. But you just could not ever stop stealing. Arrogantly asking this dedicated board to blindly raid the Sacred Youth Fund to quickly pay off DeAndre criminal tax liens was your final, absolute, fatal mistake. And as of today, Vanguard Real Estate is officially permanently terminating your commercial ground lease," I announced loudly. "You have exactly 30 days to entirely, completely vacate this large premises." The shocked boardroom absolutely erupted violently. The senior deacons turned fiercely on Pastor Thomas, demanding his immediate formal written resignation, while Vivian wailed incredibly loudly. I walked out to the parking lot, finding DeAndre looking wildly unhinged, tightly gripping a metal crowbar. He was rapidly pacing furiously between my securely parked luxury sedan and his repossessed sports car, his chest heaving with erratic, shallow breaths. The expensive designer suit he wore just yesterday was heavily wrinkled and thoroughly stained with sweat, perfectly reflecting the rapid, catastrophic, complete collapse of his fake millionaire lifestyle. When he saw me stepping out of the heavy church doors, his eyes widened with manic desperation. He sprinted across the asphalt, raising the heavy iron tool high above his head. "You set me up, you vindictive witch!" he screamed, his voice cracking with absolute panic. "You hid all this massive wealth while I was drowning in your failing logistics company. I know the law, Zarya. Vanguard Real Estate was created while we were legally married. That makes it marital property. I am entitled to 50% of every single asset you own." He slammed the crowbar hard against the hood of my car, leaving a deep, ugly dent in the pristine paint. "You are going to call your fancy lawyers right now and sign Vanguard over to me," he demanded wildly, spit flying from his lips. "You are going to pay off the IRS, and you are going to pay off those crypto investors before they kill me. If you do not sign those transfer papers right this second, I will smash every single window in this vehicle, and then I will come after you. You owe me half of your empire." I stood perfectly still, making absolutely no move to retreat. My expression remained entirely cold and detached. I did not even reach for my phone to call the police. I just watched his pathetic unraveling with utter disgust. Before DeAndre could swing the heavy iron bar a second time, a large, muscular hand clamped firmly around his wrist, stopping his downward momentum completely dead in its tracks. DeAndre choked on his next breath, stumbling awkwardly backward as the heavy crowbar was effortlessly ripped from his shaking fingers. Jamal stood towering over his older brother, his broad shoulders blocking DeAndre's path to my car. Jamal tossed the heavy iron tool onto the pavement where it clattered loudly against the concrete. He looked at DeAndre with an expression of pure absolute disgust. "You threw away a brilliant, loyal queen for a cheap, superficial knockoff," Jamal said, his deep voice vibrating with heavy contempt. "And now that your stupid choices have finally caught up with you, you want to stand here in a church parking lot and act like a violent street thug. You are a pathetic, complete disgrace to this entire family, man." DeAndre stared at his brother in utter shock, rubbing his bruised wrist. "Jamal, what are you doing here?" DeAndre stammered, his aggressive posture instantly deflating. "You are supposed to be on my side. We are blood." Jamal scoffed, shaking his head slowly. "Blood does not excuse absolute toxic stupidity," he countered firmly. "While you were busy lying, cheating, and stealing to impress some shallow opportunist, Zarya was actually building a real legacy. And unlike you, she remembers exactly who showed her genuine loyalty." Jamal turned, slightly gesturing toward the massive commercial development project, visible just blocks away in the downtown skyline. "Zarya explicitly hired my independent contracting firm to completely build out the brand new multi-million-dollar global headquarters for Vanguard Real Estate Trust." Jamal revealed, his voice ringing with profound, undeniable pride. "She handed me the biggest commercial contract of my entire career. I am hiring dozens of local workers. I am rapidly expanding my business across the state. I am truly thriving because I chose to operate with basic honesty and integrity. You chose to operate with lies and massive fraud. Now I am managing a legitimate multi-million-dollar construction empire, and you are facing imminent federal prison time for extreme financial embezzlement." DeAndre staggered backward as the devastating reality of his brother's massive success physically struck him. The passenger door of my luxury sedan smoothly opened, and Elias Sterling stepped out onto the warm asphalt. He adjusted his sharp-tailored suit jacket and calmly walked over to where DeAndre stood shivering in the afternoon heat. Elias did not look angry. He simply looked incredibly bored by the entire pathetic display. Elias reached inside his sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of formal legal documents bound by a heavy blue clip. He pressed the thick stack aggressively into DeAndre's trembling chest, forcing him to instinctively grab the papers. "You have just been officially served," DeAndre Elias stated, his tone perfectly flat and professional. That is a permanent comprehensive restraining order, strictly prohibiting you from coming within 1,000 feet of Zaria, her personal residence, her commercial properties, or any Vanguard real estate office. Violating this federal court order will result in your immediate unbailable incarceration. DeAndre stared blankly at the bold legal print, his hands shaking so violently the papers audibly rattled. "You cannot do this to me," DeAndre whispered, his voice barely squeaking out of his dry throat. "Half of Vanguard belongs to me. It is a strictly legal marital asset. I will fight this in court. I will expose everything." Elias laughed, a short, harsh sound completely devoid of any humor. "You truly have a staggering inability to comprehend basic corporate law." Elias mocked, gently adjusting his silver tie clip. "You own absolutely nothing, DeAndre. Vanguard Real Estate Trust was never a marital asset. It was legally established under a completely impenetrable, irrevocable trust, strictly prior to your wedding day. It was entirely funded by Zaria maternal grandmother, massive inheritance. That specific wealth was fiercely legally protected long before you ever managed to slip a cheap wedding ring on her finger. You have absolute zero legal claim to a single penny of her corporate empire. You signed away your only chance at a stable future the exact moment you aggressively demanded sole ownership of a bankrupt logistics company." DeAndre dropped the restraining order onto the dirty pavement, his legs finally giving out completely. He fell hard onto his knees, his expensive, ruined suit scraping against the rough, sharp asphalt. He looked up at me, his eyes welling with pathetic, desperate tears. "Zaria, please," he begged, openly sobbing in the middle of the parking lot. "The shadow crypto investors are actively hunting me down right now. The IRS has fully frozen every single bank account I have access to. I have absolutely zero money for a basic criminal defense lawyer. They are going to lock me in a federal cell for decades. Please just give me enough cash to pay them off. I will walk away forever." I did not say a single word. I simply turned my back on his pathetic groveling, stepped gracefully into the plush leather interior of my luxury sedan, and instructed my private driver to take me home. Jamal offered his brother one final look of deep pity before walking away to his own heavy-duty work truck, left completely alone and utterly shattered. DeAndre scrambled to his feet. He frantically ordered a premium rideshare using an old credit card, desperately hoping it would not decline. He sped directly back to the luxury downtown penthouse, his chest tight with suffocating absolute terror. He burst through the heavy front doors, finding Chloe aggressively throwing colorful designer clothes into a massive leather suitcase. She did not even look up when he clumsily fell into the room. "Chloe, you have to help me," DeAndre pleaded, falling to his knees, grabbing the smooth fabric of her dress. "Zaria has completely blocked me from absolutely everything. I am totally ruined. The ruthless federal agents are coming for me today. You need to quickly sell your grandmother vintage diamond bracelet. It is easily worth $80,000. If you sell it today, I can pay a top-tier criminal defense lawyer to keep me out of federal prison. We can run away together and start completely over." Chloe violently snatched her dress out of his desperate, sweaty grip. She turned to face him, her beautiful features twisted into a mask of pure, cold, calculating disgust. She looked at him as if he were a piece of rotting garbage. "Sell my grandmother precious heirloom jewelry to pay for your idiotic, massive criminal mistakes," she sneered, her voice dripping with absolute venomous contempt. "You are completely out of your tiny, useless mind, DeAndre. You promised me a flawless life of elite luxury and infinite power. Instead, you dragged me into a federal tax fraud investigation and got my brand new firm evicted. You are a broke, pathetic, lying fraud. I am absolutely not going down with a rapidly sinking ship to save a man who cannot even afford his own car payments. We are permanently done right now." She grabbed her packed leather suitcase and marched sharply toward the door, leaving him sobbing helplessly on the floor. But Chloe still had one last incredibly desperate, dangerous play left to make. The annual Alpha Kappa Alpha Alumni Gala was the undisputed pinnacle of Atlanta high society. For the city elite Black professionals, It was an absolute mandatory appearance where million-dollar deals were quietly struck over expensive champagne and philanthropy. Chloe viewed this spectacular event as her ultimate salvation. She poured the very last of her hidden credit limits into a breathtaking custom emerald green evening gown, determined to project an aura of unbroken wealth. If she could just secure enough private backing from these powerful women, she could effortlessly launch a brand new lifestyle brand and permanently erase the humiliating stain of the Vanguard eviction. She glided confidently through the opulent ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel, flashing her brilliant practiced smile at prominent judges, wealthy surgeons, and established corporate executives. She smoothly handed out freshly printed glossy business cards, whispering tragic rehearsed stories about being violently blindsided by a deeply unstable, jealous sibling. She expertly painted herself as a resilient, innocent victim of a sudden bitter family feud, masking her desperate need for capital behind a brave, inspiring facade. When the regional sorority director finally called Chloe up to the main podium as a featured spotlight entrepreneur, Chloe adjusted her posture perfectly. She gripped the edges of the cherrywood podium, taking a slow, measured breath. She looked out at the sea of beautiful, successful women and let a single, perfect tear slip down her cheek. "Sisters," she began, her voice trembling with expertly manufactured vulnerability. "This past week has tested my faith in ways I never thought possible. I have faced unimaginable betrayal from my own flesh and blood. I was brutally targeted by a deeply disturbed sister who actively sought to destroy my livelihood out of pure malicious spite. But I stand before you tonight not as a victim, but as a survivor. I am actively seeking visionary partners to help me rebuild a brand new empowering empire from the ashes of family trauma." She paused, bowing her head slightly, fully expecting a thunderous wave of supportive applause to validate her incredible performance. The applause did not come. Instead, a heavy, suffocating silence fell over the massive ballroom. The regional director stepped back up to the microphone, her expression shifting from polite interest to sheer professional shock as she looked toward the main ballroom doors. Before we continue with our spotlight speeches, the director announced, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. "We must acknowledge the mystery platinum sponsor who completely funded tonight's magnificent gala. Please welcome the sole founder and chief executive officer of Vanguard Real Estate Trust, Zaria Sterling." The heavy brass doors swung open wide. I walked into the spectacular ballroom wearing a stunning tailored white silk tuxedo that practically glowed under the crystal chandeliers. My hair was pulled back into a sleek, flawless bun, and my posture radiated absolute supreme authority. The collective gasp from the elite crowd was audible. Every single head turned to watch me glide down the center aisle. Chloe's face turned the color of ash. Her hands locked onto the podium so tightly her knuckles turned completely white. She looked like a trapped animal desperately searching for an invisible exit. I did not rush. I took my time, walking smoothly up the short stairs to the main stage. The regional director politely handed me the microphone and stepped back. I did not scream. I did not raise my voice or show a single ounce of anger. I looked out at the prominent women in the audience and then turned my cold gaze directly toward my trembling sister. "Thank you for that incredibly moving fictional performance, Chloe," I said, my voice perfectly calm and smooth, projecting effortlessly through the massive sound system. "It takes a truly special kind of audacity to stand before this esteemed room of highly successful, brilliant Black women and ask for their hard-earned money while actively wearing stolen property." The elite crowd murmured in confusion, their eyes darting rapidly between Chloe and me. Chloe instinctively brought her hand to her wrist, trying to hide the sparkling vintage diamond bracelet she had proudly paired with her emerald gown. "You are a liar," Chloe hissed, leaning toward the microphone, her voice cracking with pure panic. "Security needs to remove this crazy woman right now. She is trying to ruin me again." I simply smiled and gestured gracefully toward the massive digital projection screens flanking the main stage. "I really prefer to let the raw, unedited truth speak entirely for itself," I announced clearly. I pressed a single button on a small remote hidden in my palm. The screens instantly flickered to life. High-definition security footage from my personal home library filled the massive displays. The timestamp clearly showed it was recorded exactly 3 days prior to my sudden return. The entire ballroom watched in absolute horrified silence as DeAndre and Chloe appeared on the giant screens, tearing recklessly through my private desk drawers. The audio was crystal clear, capturing every single toxic word perfectly. "Just grab the damn inheritance money," Chloe DeAndre voice echoed loudly through the ballroom. "She does not deserve a single penny of it." On the screen, Chloe eagerly snatched our late grandmother antique velvet jewelry box. She pulled out the heavy vintage diamond bracelet, holding it up to the light with a greedy, malicious sneer. "Look at this old junk," Chloe voice projected through the high-quality speakers. "I am going to sell it and use the cash to buy a table at that stupid, pretentious AKA gala. Those stuck-up rich snobs will blindly throw their money at any sad sob story I sell them. They are all just desperate, bored housewives pretending to be important business tycoons anyway." A collective sharp intake of breath swept through the entire ballroom. Prominent judges, wealthy doctors, and powerful executives stared at the screen in absolute sheer revulsion. The exact women Chloe had just spent the last 2 hours passionately charming and desperately begging for money were now listening to her maliciously mock their entire existence and dismiss their hard-earned achievements. On the giant screen, Chloe slipped the stolen diamond bracelet directly onto her wrist, laughing cruelly with DeAndre. "It looks so much better on me anyway," she sneered on the video. "Zarya is just a pathetic, boring loser who will never amount to anything." The video abruptly cut to black, leaving the ballroom in a deafening, heavy silence. I turned slowly back to Chloe, who was now physically shaking violently behind the podium. The vintage diamond bracelet she was wearing exactly matched the stolen heirloom on the screen. "You did not just steal from me, Chloe," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet pitch that commanded absolute attention. "You stole directly from the sacred memory of our grandmother. You stole from the very legacy of the strong women who built this community. And then you arrogantly came here tonight to steal from the very women you mocked. You are not a victim. You are a common thief and a complete, absolute fraud." The regional director stepped forward, her face an absolute mask of pure professional fury. She looked at Chloe with utter revulsion. "Miss Thomas," the director said coldly, emphasizing her maiden name. "You are officially permanently banned from this organization and any affiliated events. Remove that stolen bracelet immediately and leave this premises before I personally call the police to have you arrested for grand larceny." The high society crowd instantly turned on her. The wealthy women who had just been smiling warmly at her now glared with absolute unconcealed disgust. They physically stepped back as if her mere presence was a toxic disease. Several prominent investors Chloe had spoken to earlier actively ripped up her glossy business cards, dropping the pieces onto the plush carpet. Chloe fumbled frantically with the clasp of the diamond bracelet, crying hysterical, ugly tears that ruined her expensive makeup. She practically threw the heavy heirloom onto the podium, her chest heaving with loud, pathetic sobs. She had absolutely nothing left. Her fake business was dead. Her stolen fiancé was facing federal prison. Her social status was permanently, completely eradicated. Stripped of her false power and completely humiliated before the only elite circle she ever truly worshipped, Chloe covered her face and ran blindly off the stage. She fled the grand ballroom in absolute disgrace, the heavy brass doors slamming shut behind her. I picked up my grandmother's beautiful diamond bracelet and secured it safely around my own wrist. I looked out at the sea of brilliant, powerful women. The regional director started clapping. Then a prominent judge joined in. Within seconds, the entire high society crowd rose to their feet, giving me a massive, deafening standing ovation. The ultimate sweet payoff was absolute, and my beautiful, brand-new, empowering, independent future had finally, truly, incredibly, and spectacularly beautifully arrived, bringing pure, endless, incredible peace to my entire victorious soul. Yes, we won. The stark fluorescent lights of the federal courthouse offered absolutely no place to hide from the grim reality of the day. 6 months after the gala, the final divorce hearing between DeAndre and me concluded with swift, brutal efficiency. I sat perfectly composed beside Elias Sterling, wearing a sharp crimson suit that projected absolute untouchable power. Across the heavy wooden aisle, DeAndre sat alone, looking completely defeated. Stripped of his expensive legal team and completely bankrupt, he was forced to represent himself. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit that hung loosely off his dramatically thinned frame. He stammered and sweated nervously as the stern judge delivered the final devastating blow to his once incredibly arrogant ego. The gavel slammed down like a physical strike. The marriage was officially dissolved, and DeAndre was formally ordered to immediately pay $5 million in restitution directly to the IRS. He slumped heavily over the defendant table, burying his face in his shaking hands, fully realizing his next stop was a federal penitentiary. I glanced briefly toward the back of the quiet courtroom. Chloe sat rigidly in the public gallery, looking completely terrified and utterly diminished. She wore large, dark sunglasses indoors, desperately trying to hide from the glaring reality that federal agents were actively investigating her for knowingly receiving stolen marital funds to fund her fake lifestyle. She was entirely trapped in her own inescapable and terrifying legal nightmare. Pastor Thomas was conspicuously absent. Following the massive financial scandal at the church, the Board of Deacons had formally ousted him completely, seizing all his remaining pastoral assets and locking him out of the very mega-church he proudly claimed to have built. The once powerful Thomas family dynasty was nothing but a pile of toxic smoking rubble blowing away in the wind. I stood up, smoothing my jacket, and walked gracefully out of the quiet courtroom, leaving the heavy wreckage of my past completely behind me. The polished marble hallway was cool and completely silent. Before I could reach the heavy glass exit doors, Vivian stepped desperately out of the shadows. She looked remarkably aged, her heavily powdered face streaked with fresh black mascara, her usual arrogant posture completely broken. She stumbled awkwardly forward, reaching out a violently trembling hand toward my expensive silk sleeve. "Zaria, please wait," Vivian begged, her voice cracking into a loud, pathetic, echoing sob. "We are still your family. You have made your point. You proved you are the strongest. We have absolutely nothing left. Please, Zaria, forgive us." I stopped walking, but I did not let her physically touch me in any way. I looked down at the woman who had spent my entire childhood making me feel incredibly small and entirely worthless. I looked at the mother who had gladly enabled my abusive sister and blindly protected a deeply corrupt husband. I felt absolutely zero anger. I felt zero lingering resentment burning inside my heart. I just felt pure, absolute, peaceful detachment. I looked directly into her desperate, crying eyes, maintaining an unbreakable emotional boundary. "I forgive you, Mom," I said, my voice perfectly calm and incredibly steady. "I forgive you for all of it. But I will never associate with you ever again. Goodbye." I turned smoothly on my heel and walked purposefully toward the bright sunlight spilling through the glass exit doors. I did not look back to see her collapse weeping onto the cold marble floor. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped outside into the bright afternoon. The autumn air was incredibly crisp and wonderfully clean, filling my lungs with pure, absolute freedom. Elias Sterling walked confidently down the wide concrete steps beside me, carrying his sleek leather briefcase. He offered a rare, genuinely warm, professional smile. "The legal ties are permanently, completely severed," Zaria, Elias stated, adjusting his silver tie clip. "You have flawlessly executed one of the most brilliant corporate and personal victories I have ever legally witnessed. The Vanguard Real Estate Trust is fully protected and generating massive, unprecedented capital. What exactly do you plan to actually do next?" Before I could verbally answer, my private mobile phone began ringing loudly inside my designer bag. I pulled it out, glancing at the bright digital screen. It was a direct call from a massive international corporate conglomerate. Elias peeked at the glowing screen and raised an impressed eyebrow. "That is the Global Investment Group calling," Elias noted, his voice laced with deep professional respect. "They are officially prepared to offer you over $50 million to fully acquire the Vanguard brand today. You could sell it all right now and simply walk away with a staggering historic fortune." I stared quietly at the ringing phone, watching the bright screen flash repeatedly. I thought about the broken people sitting crying inside the courthouse. I thought about the massive, beautiful empire I had quietly built from the absolute dark ashes of their toxic abuse. I did not need their validation anymore. I did not need the corporate world to dictate my ultimate financial worth. I calmly pressed the red button completely, ignoring the multi-million-dollar call, and gracefully slipped the sleek phone back into my expensive handbag. I walked smoothly down the final concrete steps toward the curb where a black chauffeur-driven Maybach was quietly idling. The uniformed driver quickly and incredibly respectfully opened the heavy bulletproof rear door for me. I slid comfortably into the plush, luxurious leather seat, crossing my legs elegantly and taking a deep, relaxing breath. I looked out the tinted window at the beautiful, sprawling city skyline I now practically legally owned. I am a strong, brilliant Black woman, completely unburdened by toxic forced family loyalty, I thought, feeling absolute total power coursing through my veins. The driver glanced respectfully in the rearview mirror, waiting for my command. "Take me to the airport," I said simply, looking forward with absolute clear vision. I am stepping bravely and permanently into my beautiful, limitless future.